I'm Brendan Vaughn, editor-in-chief of Fast Company, and welcome to Office Hour, my show about what it takes to lead in a world that never stops changing. On today's episode, we're doing something a little different. We're just home from Austin, Texas, where we popped up the Fast Company Grill at South by Southwest. We've been doing this for about 15 years now. We spoke with a nonstop parade of great speakers at the grill, and for today's episode, we're featuring highlights from the leaders who took the stage in Austin. That's Yahoo CEO Jim Lanzone, Rivian founder and CEO RJ Scaringe, Kim Vaccarella, founder and CEO of Bogg, the lifestyle brand known for its durable, washable beach totes, Jen Zeszut, co-founder and CEO of Goodles, which makes a healthier mac and cheese, and Stack Overflow CEO Prashanth Chandrasekar. But first, when in Texas, you have to talk cowboy boots. Our next clip is a conversation between senior staff editor Jeff Beer and Tecovas president and CEO David Lafitte. Shout out to Tecovas for hosting a party at their beautiful store on South Congress a couple nights ago, where I bought a jacket because the temperature swung 50 degrees in one day. That's Austin in the springtime. Early on in the conversation, David mentioned that he made storytelling an OKR for every department at the company. Not just for marketers, everyone. Even the folks in packaging and material. Jeff circled back on this point a little later on in the panel, and it led to a broader conversation about creativity.
Well, I want to go back to establishing storytelling as an OKR, because there is with my panel earlier this morning, we were talking about long form and kind of the tendency or the pressure to churn out stuff. And maybe that's going back to how the brand ended up where you saw it, where it felt diluted or it felt very consistent with a lot of other stuff out there. What were the conversations like around this pivot within the company? Like, was that a tough kind of shift or a tough thing to institute with, say, supply chain and materials?
No.
They have to think about storytelling when they're doing their thinking about what materials?
Not at all. I think everybody embraced it. It was something that they kind of felt liberated to go do, knowing that we have the patience. We don't need to see clicks and things immediately. If we're running a linear TV commercial or we're doing something like this film, I'm not expecting to see a bump on our website, in the next day or two.
Yeah.
So we have to have the patience to see what kind of traffic we're driving. And generally over time, it's more qualified traffic. We're lifting the baseline quite a bit. But I think everyone embraced this storytelling concept. And because we have to talk about the materials, the product, but doing it in a way that drives an emotional connection with the consumer. And we do that in our retail stores. It's harder to do a lot with content or with, your e-com site. But that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I was thinking of that. Like, do you see a direct line between this new-ish approach to content with how you guys have approached retail and ultimately how you approach your product itself, like just like that sense of craft, that sense of like slowing down?
Absolutely. As I said, I think this sort of lends itself to that craftsmanship pillar that we have on our product and a lot of the things we do.
Yeah.
So
you have a 25-year background in corporate law.
Yeah.
And when we spoke earlier, you talked about not being on the creative side, but really trying to establish a sandbox for your creative team to play in with some guardrails. Tell me about that, and how is that difficult in the context of like running the business? Like, explain what the sandbox is, how that's established, and then how you find the guardrails from your side.
I think in general, since my background is not brand building, it's not doing a lot of the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
One thing I know is I've got to surround myself with incredible people that do know what they're doing. So that's step number one. And I feel like as long as we're aligned as a team and we're fairly clear on what the North Star is, then I can turn these folks loose and let them get after their job without me micromanaging them. I'm not going to go explain to them, I think we should use this color or that font. They know all that stuff better than I do. So once we've hired these folks, I think it's incumbent upon us to empower them to go do their job. And I think what you and I kind of touched on a little bit ago was when we have a guy like Scott Blue, who is incredibly creative, and I've seen what he can do, I think it's in our best interest to kind of give him a sandbox to play in.
Yeah.
And him knowing what those guardrails are and what the North Star is. And he's proven that he can connect those dots in a way that's brand building and again, getting this emotional connection with our consumers. So it's just trusting, your team. And I think, it's trust but verify. It's, my philosophy a lot of times is leading from the edge and jumping into the core from time to time, but then getting back out and letting them run with it.
Tecovas has emphasized storytelling and invested in it quite a bit on the marketing front. They premiered a short film called Love Letter to Texas, directed by Jeff Nichols during South by Southwest. On the opposite end of that kind of prestige brand storytelling is good old-fashioned word of mouth. Our next panel features executives whose brands have tapped into cult followings of their products for growth. Staff editor David Salazar asked Jen Zeszut, CEO of Goodles, and Kim Vaccarella, founder and CEO of Bogg, to share some examples of their fans doing the marketing for them. You'll hear from Jen first.
If they say, oh my God, have you heard of Goodles? You have to try it. And they tell 100 people, that's so much more effective and more authentic than us running a paid ad. So we don't do that. We do invest. Believe me, we spend some money, but we spend money on people like our head of community, Emma, who's right here. Her title is Big Fan. She's a big fan. But, if we see someone by themselves, just throwing a Goodles block party with their own money, we're like, oh my God, that's such a cute idea. Who else wants to throw a block party? And we'll just ship product to them. If someone's doing a 21st birthday tasting party where they're tasting all the Goodles flavors and pairing it with alcohol, we're like, oh my God, you're so cute. Anybody else want a tasting party? Our marketing is just amplifying the brand love and helping them get the word out to their friends. That's way more authentic than anything we could ever do on the paid side.
Right, and it comes back to product, right? I mean, if people are out there throwing block parties, or I've got a couple friends who can't eat gluten, and they're like, it is the best gluten-free mac and cheese. Well, up there.
It is. It is.
That comes back to product. Kim, what are some moments for you that are like, oh, wow, these fans really love us enough to talk about us and share their Bogg love?
Yeah, well, it started early on for us, but it really kind of exploded over COVID for us. I had retired after a 26-year career to take on Bogg Bag full-time in 2018 and left my job and having a paycheck to run this company to find out that COVID was going to destroy everything. But what we found was a lot of creativity come out of COVID, especially from our small retail partners that were struggling to keep the lights on. But then everybody was home and everybody was on the internet. Mm-hmm. So our first time we went viral was through Peloton Moms. And
wow.
I don't own a Peloton. I wasn't on the Peloton, but what they were seeing was a lot of people putting their shoes and, different supplies next to their Peloton. And then everybody would start asking, hey, what is that bag? And then it was Bogg bags. And that was the first time that we actually went really viral. And then it just continued from there. But it's just the love for the bag. It's the love for the customization, for being unique and making it your own that people love to share.
People love to feel like tastemakers, I think. And when they discover something new or something with a mission, the way that is refreshing in the way that Rare Beauty is, it is a big moment to share it with people. And that is an organic sort of marketing strategy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting for us too, because I had never seen this before, but I've seen it with Stanley or another brand, but we have groups, Bogg bag groups that aren't created by us that have 40 to 60,000 people in them, which is so insane to me. But it's been super helpful where everybody's sharing their different ideas for Bogg bag and where they would go next and how they're decorating, and this offshoot of makers that make different items to hang from your Bogg bag, go in the holes of Bogg bag. So that really caused us to ramp up our charming and our bidding capabilities so that you really can make it fun. And they love to have things hanging all over the Bogg bag. So it's a good time.
Amazing.
Yeah, the customization angles, the beauty angles, for us, it's innovation. Every time we launch a new flavor, it'll be like, I'm broadcasting from aisle 23. I'm seeing thrilled cheese. It's the first time, I've ever seen this grilled cheese, mac and cheese from Goodles. The influencers love finding whatever's hot and what's new. So that's just another thing that we can do faster than our competitors can. So we got to keep innovating. Fuels the community for sure.
Next, our head of editorial programming, Casey Afini, hosted a discussion called The New Playbook for Agility During Disruption with Prashanth Chandrasekar, CEO of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow, if you aren't familiar, is a question and answer website for computer programmers. Basically, if you're a programmer and have a problem with HTML or JavaScript or anything else, you can go on Stack Overflow, ask your question, and you'd get help from a community of experts, which was probably the most convenient way to get a deeply technical question answered until the emergence of LLMs.
I have a question for you on this topic, because I know in a previous interview, Prashanth, you said that you described the moment inside Stack Overflow as code red whenever ChatGPT was emerging, because obviously this is hitting your industry, your business really hard. And so for you, as a leader of this company, of this big company, like what did that disruption teach you? Like how did you pivot? How did you move?
So like I said, we've been around for 18 years and definitely the most dominant knowledge base for technology for throughout that period. And then in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, we realized that all the data that we had generated through human contributions through our community of 100 million people was now being used by them and other AI companies. So very much a moment of, you can call it the code red moment. I might have used a different term in the moment. But definitely it was absolutely jarring, because you have to then figure out what is the mission and purpose of your organization. Why do you exist? What value do you provide to society, to our users, to companies that we serve? And so it's very much like a refounding moment for the company. So that's effectively what we had to do. And I had been through this a couple other times where, I used to work at Rackspace. So it's one of the reasons I moved to Texas, back in 2012. Back then, Amazon Web Services through the cloud had disrupted the traditional managed hosting industry, if you folks remember that. And that was a similar moment where you have to then figure out exactly how do you get out of that as an incumbent. And one of the ways you do that is to carve out a very autonomous team that is purpose-built to almost think of it as like you don't have the pressures of the existing business. You're just going as like a brand new company inside your company and going and disrupting yourself to go do something. So that's effectively what we did at Stack. When ChatGPT came out, we carved out a team of about 10% of the company, and we basically said, we are going to give this team complete autonomy to go after it. We're going to measure them completely differently compared to the original, the rest of the organization, different incentives, and go and think about how we're going to use AI to solve customer problems, user problems, not just for the sake of using it. And let's have a very specific timeline to do that. So I put a stake in the ground where we said by the summer of 2023, we were going to announce to our user base what we're actually doing with AI. And so we had a sprint from, let's call it January-ish to July, where we had this team of, the 10% of the company that was just cranking away every week, and we said, don't come out until you actually figure it out. I personally ran product at that time also, because I think it is very difficult to delegate something as fundamental as what's going on, right? So you have to be sort of in the trenches with your folks. So a lot of change, a lot of disruption, not for everybody, not for the faint-hearted. And if you're not going to embrace doing things differently and being adaptive, then you're going to be very, very much in trouble. So that was the code red moment. And since then, we announced our AI products in the summer. We also then went and partnered with every single AI lab that had leveraged our data and wants to leverage our data. So we did partnerships with OpenAI, we did partnerships with Google, all the big cloud hyperscalers, and we effectively now have data licensing partnerships with them where they pay us for access to our corpus of data on the public platform for historical and ongoing access on a recurring basis. So foundationally, financially, we're in excellent shape as a function of that. And then our enterprise business, what we started noticing over the past, let's call it 18 months, is we have what we used to call Stack Overflow for Teams, which is a private Stack Overflow inside the largest organizations and companies. And we started noticing that the APIs of that product were red hot inside companies. And when we went to talk to them, they said they were using it to power their AI agent experiments and assistants that were going and answering Slack channels and support tickets and all these sort of things. And that gave us insight to say, we should be building the next generation version of that product meant for AI agents. So then we went and built that over the past 18 months, and we launched that this past year as something called Stack Internal, which is now the knowledge intelligence layer that companies use to hoover up relevant context within all your various interactions, agent interactions, Slack interactions, your documents, and produce this very valuable context that then can be reused by other agents, because the team-based problem has not been solved. So we believe we can be the authoritative context layer for enterprises to use AI agents. So, and by the way, we're not done yet, meaning this world is just continuing to accelerate. It is only the early innings. I think we're talking less than 10% adoption across the world, right? I'm talking about just if you think about the population with AI. So this is technology, get used to it. There's going to be multiple more waves on this topic, and it's here to stay.
Adapting to AI was also the gist of our next conversation, my fireside chat with Jim Lanzone, CEO of Yahoo since 2021. Lanzone is a repeat turnaround artist. He gets credit for reviving Ask Jeeves, CBS Interactive, Tinder, and now Yahoo. The legacy internet brand has revamped its homepage, made major investments in their finance and sports vehicles, and have recently launched an AI search platform called Scout. For all the momentum Lanzone has generated driving Yahoo's turnaround, they're late to the game on launching an AI search product. He has been working at South by Southwest to articulate what differentiates Scout.
So why should someone use, you guys are a little bit late in the answer engine game. There's a lot of competition out there. Why should somebody switch to Scout?
I think in the wide swath of history, as we look at where search is headed, this 3 years in will not seem that late. 4.5 years ago, taking over the company had a lot to fix. We had to do all the transformation work first. Then we had to relaunch every version of our product second. And then we could kind of turn our attention to search about a year ago. And as we looked at it, we could just keep licensing search the way Yahoo did for many years. And we have a relationship with Microsoft Bing that goes back to 2009. But when it came to AI search, we truly determined that the best company to build AI search for Yahoo was Yahoo. And the reason goes to the differentiation is that we have 30 years of search query history, 30 years of user data, usage data, all these thousands of relationships with publishers where we send them traffic over the years, and we actually are very tied into all the publishers that we take that very seriously, and we share revenue and send people downstream, and we're a big part of the traffic flow of the internet still. We take that very seriously. So that is all very unique data that, I don't know if everybody knows the history of large language models, but the way they were created was by going out and really without knowledge or permission, sucking in the entire internet. And the way they work is they predict the next letter. So they're not actually conducting normal search. It's almost like autocomplete. They're like anticipating, well, what is the likely next word here? So that's why
the next syllable, right?
The next syllable. Next token, and so when you're getting results that feel very personal to you, or you think that they're really answering, that's what they're doing. They're predicting. So step one was they all digested the same information. Step two is they're all based on the same transformer paper that Google published in 2017 about how to do this. So they all work the same way. And so there may be some differences, but they're very slight. They're all pretty similar in how they were conceived and composed, and they're all very similar in how they produce results. So we thought, look, if you take all of our data and you just apply a model to that data, we could have very differentiated results over time, very personalized, because 70% of our users are logged in and come to Yahoo directly. And so we could produce a very unique, useful set of results. And then we also thought that the first generation of these AI engines were not really created in a way that maintained the social contract with the open web, with all the publishers from whom they got that content. They took it, but then the way you guys all know this from your own usage, the interfaces all look the same. They look like a PhD student at UC Berkeley created it with a bunch of citations at the end that do not link back to the publishers from whom they got the content in the first place. So we wanted to fix that. So our interface, which I think also has just more personality in general than these other engines, very specifically has highlights that are linkable back to all the publishers. And we put a lot of effort into that so that, and by the way, I'm actually happy if the other engines copy us on this, because I actually think it's good for the internet itself. Because without these publishers, there will be no content left to produce the answers that we're all getting from AI search. So yes, we also had like a core value in the product. Like not only do we think we could produce really high quality results, which if you go to Yahoo Scout at scout.com, you will see I will stand our results up next to anybody's, but also differentiated. And then they maintain this value of trying to do the right thing and send traffic back to publishers.
And just so people know, so it's out as a Yahoo product. Do you need to be logged in to use it, or is it can you use it?
You do not. So it would be helpful for a couple of reasons. One is we just launched in January, and I should say when I point to Eric Fang in the back of the room here, we actually acquired his startup last summer, and he came in to lead consumer search. And Eric is a luminary in the history of search in our industry. He also created Hulu, by the way, for Hulu users here. And my background was in search. My first 10 years in the industry were in search. And so he had an amazing team and vision for like what this could really be. And what we launched in January was just 6 months of work. So we really are just getting started in what this will be. So over time, it will become more and more personalized. So I think being logged in will really help the quality of the results that you're getting. Second thing is, I don't know how many people here are OGs, but a lot of people used to love a product called My Yahoo, which was a personalized portal for the internet that you could customize on yahoo.com. That went away when we got here because it had become very convoluted. The back end didn't work, and it was just going to be impossible to upgrade. Eric, just this week, 2 days ago, in fact, relaunched a version of that on the Scout technology. So it's being created on the fly by AI, by Scout. It's called My Scout. It's not called My Yahoo, but you actually now get at scout.com a personalized portal on the fly in two ways. One is if you're logged in with Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Sports, Yahoo News, Yahoo Mail, you're actually getting pre-populated a personalized portal. And it's awesome. It's super slick. But the second is you can create new categories on the fly just by doing a query into Scout. So if you prompt Scout, like I was doing in testing before we launched, Olympic gold medal winners. And every time there's a new gold medal winner, it would update. And you can do that on any topic. And so create new tiles for yourself on your own portal. So yes, you do not need to be logged in, but being logged in will help.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, this tees up my next question in a pretty good way because it's about my question's about discoverability. And thank you for what you were saying about publishers. Fast Company, like any publisher, is dealing with the way that the fundamental nature of information retrieval on the internet and who's reading what where and the monetization or lack of monetization for publishers involved in that process. So we think a lot about discovery, but it's not just a media thing. Anybody that wants to be found on the internet right now, it has discoverability challenges. So beyond Yahoo, can you share your kind of high-level view on how you see the problem of discoverability right now?
Well, I think you're largely talking about SEO and search and kind of historically what drove that. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of you work in publishing, but just from your own usage of these products, you know that you're not clicking on many links when you're getting these answers.
The thing is, and I admit this at my own peril as someone in media, but these interfaces are good. Not all great, but like you like how easy it is.
I think there was a big bang in November of 2022. The product is so good that only happens about once every 5 years. It's one of the reasons why Yahoo is still so big and relevant is they don't come along very often. Before ChatGPT, I think it was TikTok. Before that, it was probably Snap. You just don't get these generationally defining products very often, and large language models were the next one, and they were the one in the most important category, which is search. I actually think that if Google had been the one to launch this product, it would look a lot more like Scout. And it would have had links, and you would have been more trained to click on those links because not only is it better to go to Fast Company and find out from the source, but you actually want to validate the answers. We all know it's happened to me in the past week. So using another engine, I got hallucinatory results back. I was doing research on a person, and I asked it about that person. I presumed that this thing was true. It told me that it was true. It was not true. I told this person this thing about their resume, and they're like, oh, I never worked at that company. And it is great to be able to validate these answers at the actual source, which is why it's important. I actually think Google will head back that direction, but the first thing they had to do was fend off ChatGPT because users were leaking over to them. So we are still early. I actually think 3 years is pretty early, and I think these UIs will gravitate back. Just since we launched a month ago, we started greeting everybody with very like quirky, cheeky greetings every time they come back. If you come to Scout and hit refresh 20 times, you're going to get a different icon, a different greeting. I've started seeing the other engines do that. I've started seeing them link in blue highlights the way we do. So I actually do think it's starting to work. And sources are important. So hopefully you won't need to spend too much mental energy trying to game, a pretty hard game, I think, to get where there are no links to kind of figure out how to get people back to you. And these things will adapt. But without it, I do think it is rough. And I saw a stat that said only 20% of publishers think that they can make decent money of any kind by being paid by large language models for taking their content. And by the way, it happens to us too. We're a top 20 publisher for having our content taken, which we don't love. But if you prevent that, then you're also preventing traditional search from getting to you. And we can't have that either.
Let's move on to our final highlight from the Fast Company Grill, my conversation with Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe. Rivian's electric SUVs have become more and more popular in recent years, and the company's numbers are improving, even as it still loses billions every year due to its massive operational and capital costs. The company is in Austin hyping its R2 line of more affordable SUVs. I say more affordable because the R1 line are pretty expensive. The R2s will begin shipping this year. But Rivian's not just an EV maker, they're a software company too. Volkswagen struck a deal to use Rivian software in all their cars, VWs, Audis, Porsches, and more, starting in 2027. Of the company's $5.39 billion in 2025 revenue, $1.56 billion of that came from software and services. That's 29%. This prompted me to blurt out a question that seemed to startle Scaringe.
Why don't they just buy you?
That's not the outcome we were looking for, yeah.
Okay.
What stuck with me the most from our conversation was his take on autonomous vehicles and AI in the physical world. I asked Scaringe about a bold prediction he had made regarding the time horizon for self-driving cars.
You recently said it will be inconceivable to buy a car that can't drive itself by 2030. At least I saw that you said that. If you were misquoted, please say so, but that was what I've read in my research. So can you rough that timeline out for us and what makes you so confident?
First, just to ground us in when we talk about self-driving, we're at the very, very beginning of starting to see what this actually means. And so in a consumer, like a personally owned vehicle, what you can buy today is what's called level 2, which means the most capable system, like a Tesla FSD, you can plug in the address into the car, it will drive to that address, but you as the driver of the vehicle still need to be paying attention. What you can experience as a general public is you can experience level 4, which is what a Waymo is, which is the vehicle can drive itself empty. And in between level 4 and level 2, there's level 3, which is the vehicle can drive itself and you can not pay attention. So you can take your hands off the wheel, your eyes off the road. And so I just described that briefly, just so we understand, we're going to go through a staircase over the next couple of years where today, level 2 is going to start to become fairly, I think, required, meaning in the next year or two. So in the case of Rivian, later this year, we launch a point-to-point navigation. So you type the address in, the vehicle will drive itself. You can have your hands off the wheel, but you have to largely be alert and paying attention. Next year, we'll go eyes off, where you can take your eyes off the road, starting with highways and then growing from there. So you can read a book on your commute. You can be on your phone. The car won't beep at you. You can be totally okay not paying attention. And then in 2028 is where we start to see what we call personal level 4, where the car can drive itself fully on its own. I'm very, very bullish on the pace at which we're going to see autonomous features progress, largely because the way we're developing autonomy is materially different than what was done from the very beginnings of this, so call it early 2010s up through 2022, where these autonomous systems were developed around a rules-based approach. So essentially we would have humans that would describe with code what the rules of the road are, how the car should behave in certain situations. And that dramatically changed as we moved to a neural net-based approach. So ironically, early self-driving cars were not actually AI. They were really rules-based environments with really sophisticated code sets, maybe some machine learning for vision processing, but not really anything in terms of modern AI. So the modern AI that's emerged in the last couple of years is just changing entirely how we approach this. So now we build large-scale foundation models by absorbing and picking up data from the large data flywheel, which is the deployed fleet, to learn to drive in a similar fashion now humans learn to drive. And it's a much more generalized skill. You can deploy it in a lot more environments more rapidly. I actually think if you take away only one thing, this is it, which is we as humans often look to the past as a way to try to predict the future. And so we look at the rate of progress of something over the last couple of years, and we say that's about what we think the next few years are going to look like. And that is often true, which is why our brains tend to think like that. But in certain areas, in certain technologies, there are inflection points that change the rate of progress. And so in the field of self-driving, and I'd say more broadly in the field of AI in the physical world, of course, we're already experiencing AI in the written video or image world. But in the physical world, the progress that's been made over the last 5 years, let's say from 2021 through 2026, is wildly different than what we're going to see between 2026 and 2031. And I think it's easy to say, oh, he's just an entrepreneur that's like overly bullish. There is a technical shift, like a fundamental inflection point that has happened that's going to lead the progress to be far greater than I think what we're expecting. So for that reason, I'm quite bullish on this. I actually think the technology is going to develop faster than society is going to be able to ingest. But I think society will quickly catch up. And the reason I think in self-driving will catch up so quickly is we see it. It's like so nice to have your time back. Imagine all of us, even if you say, I don't trust self-driving, you get in the car and you're like, oh, my phone's buzzing. I'd love to look at it. Or boy, I'm sitting next to someone. I'd love to have a conversation and not pay attention. You try it a few times. You start to realize the car is much safer. It doesn't get distracted. The bright light of the sun doesn't mess up your vision of the road. Can see perfectly at night. Like all these things that we as humans are imperfect at driving at, as evidenced by the fact that there's unfortunately over 40,000 deaths from human driving every year today, just in the United States alone. It's a much, much larger number for the globe. So I think we're going to see a big shift in how we operate our vehicles. I'm bullish on this over the next 5 years, but certainly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Which brings us to the end of this episode. Certainly the most wide-ranging show we've done to date. Lots of wisdom in there from leaders who run businesses of all shapes and sizes. Thanks for listening, and if we missed you at this year's Fast Company Grill, there's always next year. Hope to see you there. Office Hour is part of the Fast Company Podcast Network. Our show is produced by Josh Christensen, editing by Matt Toder, mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Be sure to subscribe to Office Hour on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also hear all episodes in the Most Innovative Companies podcast feed. If you like this podcast, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, or let us know in the comments of Fast Company's social media.